I'd really like to compliment the Institute. Sometimes they do a really good job. In aggregate, they do a great job. This program is well regarded because of the underlying content. It's also very rigorous, as you know. They put in this insurance reading a few years ago. They've had this material, but the old readings really weren't very good. They were pretty superficial. This reading, we've really delved into important issues, and they haven't made it overly mathematical. They're not trying to teach you to be an actuary. They're not showing you how to do every calculation that goes on, but they are showing you the underlying drivers that matter. Insurance doesn't build wealth. Insurance diversifies risk. In aggregate, the insured could probably do a better job on the money as their own, but there's no risk reduction. They can't earn mortality credits on their own. That's important material to know. And now we're going to pull that together. We're going to look at, so what is the role here? You don't have to buy insurance for something, and they're saying you should not. You could do risk avoidance. If a risk is likely to occur and it's very severe, you shouldn't buy insurance. The problem is it's very frequent and very likely to happen, which means the cost of the insurance will be too expensive. You just need to avoid that kind of risk. I love this example. You really love to go swimming, and you're very happy to swim with really hungry sharks. You're going to die regularly. It's going to be hard to buy life insurance for that because the cost would be astronomical. Just stop doing that. Don't do things that are that self-destructive. That's risk avoidance. What if the risk does happen regularly, but it's not catastrophic? You can survive it. It's just, you're constantly losing. Well, why don't you try to reduce it? Just don't do it as often. I love this example. You always like to park and you never bother to put money in the parking meter. You're going to constantly get tickets. You can afford it, but it is aggravating. Why don't you just reduce the risk? Why don't you just not do it as often? You don't even have to stop doing it completely. One ticket is not catastrophic. You're not dead. It's not like the shark ate you. It's just inconvenient. It would be easy to reduce the risk. Just don't take it as often. There's no reason to buy insurance for those things. What if something doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, it really is catastrophic? That's when you need insurance. It's catastrophic if it happens. You need protection. It doesn't happen very often, so the cost of the insurance is not going to be excessive. The company is going to realize it's not a frequent occurrence. They can charge a pretty manageable premium, and therefore you need insurance. We started out with the stages of life. We started out with a discussion of when you might need different types of insurance. Take a look back at that. It should start to make more sense now that you have the context. But there's one other option. Just take the risk. Don't worry about it. It doesn't happen very often. If it does happen, it's no big deal. Just keep doing it. For goodness sakes, don't pay somebody to buy insurance. Hey, $49 watch. I used to wear Timex. They're really not as good anymore. I found this Casio, $25. I'm not going to insure this thing. It breaks, I'll go buy another one. What's the big deal? And it rarely breaks. It works really well. I'm accepting the risk. Something goes wrong, I'll just go buy another watch. That's self-insurance. So insurance should not be used in every case. Insurance should be limited to situations where it makes sense. Let's tie that back to the holistic balance sheet and to an example. So, what should we think about asset allocation of total wealth? Suppose my human capital is very high risk. Well, high risk means equity-like, diversification. Generally, you can't tell your client, we don't like the nature of your job, go get a different kind of job. That's usually not practical. So we take the human capital as a given. It's high risk. But we can change the nature of the financial capital. All else the same, we would move it more towards bonds for the financial capital within the context of the overall desired asset allocation. The human capital is more or less a given. We can adjust where we place the financial capital to get the desired level of total risk. Take the opposite extreme, the human capital is very low risk. That's more fixed income-like. All else the same, we could shift the financial capital more towards equity. I do like the situation the Institute keeps using for the example of what's an ultimate example of low-risk human capital. A tenured university professor. The salaries aren't great, the rate of return is a little low, but once you're tenured, basically, I think there's stories that even dead professors keep getting paid. You know that kind of stuff. It's not like it's a high-risk job once you get the tenure. So if they have very low-risk human capital, all of the things the same, let's tilt the financial capital towards higher risk to achieve the desired level of total risk. So we're moving beyond looking only at the financial capital to also considering the nature of the human capital. That's a form of diversification. So to summarize, if we think about systematic market risk, we can manage that in the ways you've learned. We can set the asset allocation for the desired level of risk exposures, and we'll be looking at that in more detail in asset allocation, but you know the basic story from level 1 and 2. When we talk about non-market, but let's go beyond just stock and bond non-market. Any type of random, idiosyncratic risk. Within the portfolio, we diversify. But we're taking diversification beyond just stock and bonds. We're also considering the nature of the human capital. So how would we diversify by doing something different with our financial capital? That's a way to diversify non-market risk. And we can also use selected insurance products where we need to transfer risk to the insurance company and to a larger pool of insured individuals. So let's take a look then, an example that sort of pulls that together. We have a couple, they're only 3 years from retirement. The wife is the sole income earner. She has a 3-year employment contract with a fixed salary, $100,000 after tax. That's very low human capital. It's very secure. It's exactly what they need to get to retirement date. And they are financially secure for the planned retirement. So they're not necessarily there yet, but it's all going to be great as long as she makes it 3 more years. Well, that could be fairly severe. If she doesn't make it, maybe they need life insurance just in case to protect if that human capital ceases prematurely. Maybe, but only if there's a need that continues if she dies prematurely. They go on to say that for the husband to maintain his lifestyle until the planned retirement date, he would need to replace 70% of her income. How much life insurance is needed today? So we have the classic situation that everything will be fine, the needs will be met if the human capital continues. But if it ceases prematurely, things are not going to be fine. We've been able to identify and quantify what is needed to get to that expected 3-year point. So we're going to use that to calculate the amount of life insurance required. We need to replace 70% of her income. 70% of $100,000 is $70,000. We need it for 3 more periods, and they have to give it to you. 10% has been the assumed appropriate discount rate. What is the present value of that annuity? Therefore, that's the amount of life insurance that should be in place today. In making that calculation, they use the annuity due that the payments were needed at the start of the period. Why? No particular reason. They are not fully consistent in the CFA curriculum. This is a case where you know the curriculum or you don't know the curriculum, and occasionally when you don't know, it will cost you. For no particular reason in this particular calculation, they are assuming those payment amounts needed of $7,000 occur at the start of each period, so you would need to do the annuity due function. If nothing else, I think this reading has pointed out to you the need to pay attention to the close issues of ordinary annuity payment at end of period. That is the general rule, as the way you should keep your calculators set. But occasionally, there are questions where they expect you to shift it to the annuity due payment at start of period function. Interesting reading, a lot of good stuff here, good things to digest, some math, but also a lot of conceptual material you need to be familiar with.